What I do is inconsequential. Why I do what I do is I get to shorten people's journeys every day. What I love about our hospitality industry is that it's our mission to make people feel cared for while on their journeys. Together, we'll explore what hospitality means in the built environment, in business, and in our daily lives. I'm Dan Ryan, and this is Defining Hospitality. This podcast is sponsored by Berman Falk Hospitality Group, a design-driven furniture manufacturer who specializes in custom case goods and seating for hotel guest rooms. Today's guest is an experienced architect with 20 years of experience. She is AIA and NCARB certified, and she has a special interest and passion for adaptive reuse. She is the Senior Vice President of Architecture at Braemar. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Aimee Sanborn. Welcome, Aimee.
Hi, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's so good for you to be here, and I'm very intrigued by Braemar, so much so that you are the second person on Defining Hospitality from Braemar, the first being your CEO, Hector Sanchez. And what I am most intrigued by with your company is how you are vertically integrated. You own, you design, you develop, all under one roof. And there's not very many like you that do that really, really well. So I want to dig into that because I'm very curious about at what point does a company like that decide to be vertically integrated? But also, some of our most popular podcasts have been when we speak with others about adaptive reuse. And I know that that is a tremendous passion of yours. So for all of you architects and designers listening who love the challenge of adaptive reuse, Aimee is here to let us know why she's so passionate about it, because I love working on them too. But from my experience as a vendor, they always take so darn long because there's always a lot of gremlins lurking around, which delays the overall project. So I find the people that I've interviewed that really, really love adaptive reuse seem to be like puzzle masters. And a lot of people, I would say the vast majority of people don't like working on them because of all of the gremlins that lurk around the corners. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Absolutely. I mean, you have to do so much due diligence within the adaptive reuse project. It's really a fun puzzle to figure out. Every building, it's its own unique challenge, and we're up to the challenge.
What do you think in your life has, like, what experience really was your first experience with adaptive reuse, and what is like the gravitational pull that pulls you there?
Yes, my goodness. Well, I graduated from grad school in 2005 and landed in Dallas. I had moved from Tampa to Dallas, and I was just very fortunate to move into downtown Dallas at a time when so many buildings were abandoned, right? There was very low residential occupancy in Dallas. I think there were maybe 800 residents downtown. And the firm that I went to, we were just very involved in the rehabilitation and of downtown and began to convert a lot of office buildings into residential and hospitality. And downtown, especially downtown Dallas Inc., we're just major players in this initiative. And, it really evolved over the subsequent 20 years. And so today, I believe there's like 15,000 people who live downtown in Dallas. It's even difficult to find a project, to rehabilitate. And several of the projects that I think, I had touched 20 years ago are now being renovated again.
That's always something that I love and hate when you make the cycle, because I'm like, oof, that means I'm getting old.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm 2 years from being historic myself. So,
Yes. And usually I call it like the turn of the zodiac, because it's like every 12 years is like the new zodiac, or you get back to dragon or pig or whatever it is. Oh no, zodiac, that's more Chinese, but there's 12 of them also. It's a universal thing. But I'm always amazed and excited, but also a little depressed when I make the cycle. When you think, okay, so another thing that you said there that I'm really intrigued by, downtown Dallas, been there many, many times. I'm shocked that in 2005, there were only 800 residents living downtown, and now there's 15,000. And I know a lot of that had to do with some addition of some museums, sports teams, like a real downtown, I don't know, reinvigoration. But what do you think the main driver for that is?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were just so many initiatives in downtown. The Arts District is the largest contiguous arts district in the United States.
Mm,
So I think that was a huge success and brought a lot of new buildings, a lot of density, a lot of office to downtown. Um, I think there is a great stock of historic projects. And what was really instrumental to the success of those projects is the historic tax credit. The historic tax credit for Texas, I believe, was implemented in 2014, but the federal tax credit had been in place. And, in combination, state and federal, it's a 45% of your qualified rehabilitation expenses. And I think that that was certainly a big driver and impetus to having a lot of the historic buildings be adapted to other uses and office buildings, right? And as you
mm.
know, with office, we had a major, boom in the 80s with the oil industry. And so there were several large scale, million square foot plus office buildings that were constructed at that time. And then post COVID, there's a lot of those buildings that are now available.
So one of the big ones that you worked on is the National,
Yes.
correct? And there was some superlative associated with that, and I want to fact check myself, but it's the second or third or second biggest adaptive reuse in the history of the United States.
I believe that's correct. It's either second or third. I was doing a little bit of research trying to determine that, but it is 1.5 million square feet.
Let's just call it the second. It's a
Yeah,
podcast.
let's
No
go.
one's,
Let's
yeah,
hear it.
it's the second largest. It's the second largest. There's no rules in podcasting. So let's just call it the second largest. We won't call it the first, the biggest. But I am curious, what do you think the biggest was?
Oh my goodness. I think it's in Chicago and I can't remember the name of it right now.
Okay.
It is, I believe it's just over 2 million square feet.
Okay. So you're definitely the second because you were at 2 million.
This one is 1.5.
Oh, 1.5, almost 2 million.
Yes.
See how I'm stretching a little bit there?
Yes.
But regardless, you're the second largest adaptive reuse in the history of the United States. Okay. So for all the listeners, whether you're the listener who likes working on adaptive reuse projects or detests working on adaptive reuse projects because of all the gremlins and surprises. One of the things that's really important to know on these super large scale adaptive reuse, there's a commercial component like office, there's usually a residential, there's a hospitality, there could be some other public arts segment of it. I'm sure I'm missing some more, but there's a tremendous amount of programming that goes into these. Um, and what I'm curious with you, especially coming over to Premiere, how does hospitality, well, first of all, what does hospitality mean to you? How do you define it? Obviously, it's the name of the show. But then how does that thread of hospitality inform how everything within that master plan adaptive reuse orchestrates itself?
Right. Yeah, I think the branding is so integral to that and really defining and tying together the entirety of the building, every use, within a vertically integrated mixed use. So I think the hotel component really sets the stage for the entirety of the project. And that identity needs to be carried throughout. But hospitality to me, it's about making people feel connected, to a place, to a story, and really to a bespoke experience. When it comes to historic buildings, it's about bringing new life to the spaces in a way that reflects their past but makes it feel fresh and welcoming. It's about thoughtful adaptation, and I think that that's really key. It's really taking the building for what it is, celebrating it for what it is, and celebrating what made it special in the first place while adapting it. So purposeful preservation.
And if you were to use the National as an example, what do you think about that development best personifies that idea of hospitality?
Oh goodness. You know, it is such a unique experience. It is a full city block within downtown Dallas. And that block was completely defunct. And it had been derelict for, I believe, 5, 10 years. And the ability to reinvigorate that, with life and make it welcoming, not just to the guests, but to the public, I think is just so key. And, it was really a curated experience that really capitalized on the architecture of the building. The architect was George Stahl and Thomas Stanley, and very prominent architect in Dallas. He had such a prolific career over, I want to say 60 years. And that building just has such a great aesthetic. It's white marble. It has this pinstripe exterior curtain wall, and it was indicative of a men's suit, right? And it had a very masculine aesthetic. And so when Thompson was brought in by the developer Todd Interest, and who really had a great vision for the building, but I thought that that was such a great symbiotic brand, for the building because it was very masculine, and it really celebrated kind of this mid-century aesthetic. And then we really kind of introduced some very feminine kind of detailing onto the interior. It just worked. And then, that identity was really carried through the full project, with the architecture and ID team and the procurement. And I thought it just was a really consistent delivery, um, and aesthetic throughout.
Mm.
So it really just told a story, and that story was crafted, by the ID team. Gail Nall led the ID team, who's was our VP when we were at our previous firm. That project was completed while we were both at our previous firm, and she is now over here as well. So she's just a great storyteller, and I thought it was just a tremendous curation of that story and every use within the building.
Wonderful shout out to Gail. Um, so having worked a little bit and have some partnerships in the hotel development side of things, what I found just from clients and other projects I'm involved in, um, you want to buy a property well, you want to make a financial pro forma that shows, an 18, 20+% IRR to all the investors that come in to do it. And oftentimes there's very little margin for error in those types of standard repositions or new developments. The tax credit that you mentioned earlier, which I think was like 45% combined, is that what gives you a margin of safety in those pro formas to be able to hit those IRRs for those gremlins or surprises that might lurk around the corner? Because as much due diligence as you do, you're still going to find some crazy things that need to be done. So like for me, who's an idiot, but like a fan of hospitality, and I see some of these struggles that my clients and other interests that I have going through, like, how do you approach a project like this? And is it safe to say that those tax credits not only boost returns, but also act as a margin of safety?
Absolutely. And, the cost of these projects is so difficult, to make pencil. Um, several of the projects that I've worked on and that Premier has worked on, it really is a complicated cap stack, including, the historic tax credits, because these projects are so costly and have so many gremlins. Like you said, I mean, the asbestos is one, right? Making sure that it has significant enough utilities, right? So there's always, civil improvements, several utilities you usually get upgraded to meet the new demands of the new use. Um, you know, the building envelope typically needs a lot of rehabilitation. Um, we have one project right now, where there's mold remediation. So there are so many facets to it that make it so difficult, to pencil that, the tax credits are such a necessary piece. We're so fortunate to work in Texas because we do have a total of 45% tax credits, unlike several other states. Um, that federal tax credit,
In Texas, you eat asbestos for breakfast too, right?
I think every building you have has some asbestos in it to be remediated, right? It's like step number one. Okay, what are we doing here? you know, phase one, immediately. Um, So, I think it's so necessary. But along with historic tax credits, I think in order to make these projects pencil, you do need additional incentives, whether that be tax increment financing. There's a couple programs out there nationally that we're looking at, like RIF and TIFIA. There's NTCOG grants, there's city grants, but it really takes, multiple layers to make these pencil.
Before we go into the multiple layers, you said Griff and Tifia. I don't know what that means. Can you like
Yes.
explain that? So one of the things that I've learned in having a lot of friends that are doing development and dabbling in it myself is that it's amazing how much capital is out there, different pools of capital looking to help achieve different outcomes, right? Whether it's providing housing, rehabilitating things, abating asbestos, doing it like C-PACE financing for sustainability. And it's just a matter of finding those pools and directing them to your cap stack. So what is Griff and Tifia?
This is above my head. I'll leave this to the development team. But they are in federal incentives that came about, I believe, a few years ago. And they have to do with, investing in projects that are close to mass transit. Both of them have kind of a density and a mass transit requirement. I think you have to be within half mile of a light rail or a high speed rail. And so one of the projects that we're working on, does kind of meet some of that criteria. So I think it is something that they continue to pursue. But Dan, it's that one's a little bit above my head.
But actually, that's really interesting because one of the things, as we're all talking about um, housing costs and bringing more residents to downtown areas, not just Dallas. One of the things that I find solves so much is density. And while so many people and neighborhoods are against density, it becomes this flywheel. Once you start bringing density in, then all the light rail works and you can extend it and there's less people on the road. And it just makes for a better run, in my opinion, city and urban landscape.
And you can think of, a large scale adaptive reuse project, 1.5, 2 million square feet. How do you take that down, right? It has to be vertically integrated mixed use. And the only way you're going to support that many uses in a building on one city block is to be located, in a very dense area that's very active and very successful. I mean, I think that a successful tower could be a catalyst to generate more density on surrounding blocks, but it is a symbiotic relationship, right?
When we spoke before we recorded about a month ago, you referred to the national, I think as a unicorn of some kind, as a project. Um,
Yes.
I know that you walked us through how hospitality and a narrative makes it a very special place, but why is the national such a city redefining project that you call a unicorn? Like what makes it a unicorn?
I mean, I think what's so interesting about it, I mean, is it does occupy this entire city block, right? And it was just it's so it's fascinating to me just the verticality of it, right? We have retail, we have this opportunity to introduce retail to the ground floor and really reinvigorate that city block. There had been nothing there for probably a decade, right? And there were several very successful retailers that are there. Loucchese, Chick-fil-A actually is a good prominent corner. And then we had kind of common lobbies where the public, could mingle. The Thompson lobby, we were able to put in event space on the lower levels in the podium, introduce a parking garage. Coming up to the upper deck, there was this massive amenity deck. It was 75,000 square feet, and we were trying to figure out how would we program this, right? And we were able to do amenity spaces there that were both shared by the luxury residential and Thompson Hotel. But there were so many fun little aspects to that, deck and historic discoveries that we were able to really celebrate there. And then above that, you have 218 218 hotel units, 324 residential units, plus some penthouses, as well as Monarch. Monarch has been a very successful restaurant downtown. I think it was started by a 2-star Michelin star chef. And that goes to the developer's, vision, right? I think it's just very holistic approach.
Mm.
But I think the opportunity to develop 1.5 million square feet is just so enticing and such a challenge. And we're about to redevelop Marin Tower, which is across the street. It's 2 million square feet. And I think Ashford's vision for it is exceptional. It's very exciting. It's going to be an even more daunting project with more uses, and a more difficult floor plate to contend with. Right? It's a wider footprint at 33,000 square feet per floor compared to the national, which was 19,000 square feet per floor. And so it does create a little bit more challenges and more opportunities.
Okay, so will that usurp the number 2 spot from the national as far as adaptive reuse?
It may take number one. I've got to go back and look at those.
Oh, so it really, because it could be more than what if you add new square footage, does that count towards the adaptive reuse if you're adding new square footage?
Let's go with it. Let's say it does.
Okay, good. So you're going to have the number 1 and potentially number 3 going. Okay, good. You mentioned you just used the word verticality, and I want to loop back to how that works with Ashford and Premier and you guys, your company being vertically integrated. So I understand the verticality now better of an adaptive reuse large format master plan project. Um, how does that work? And what's been your experience as far as how that relates to Ashford and then Premier?
Sure. Yeah. So, Ashford is our parent company, and there are two REITs associated with Ashford, Ashford Trust and Braemar. And those REITs, I think Ashford owns about 90 hotels and Braemar approximately 15. So basically, Premier was born to support those projects, right? The renovation of all of the hotels, that were in the REIT portfolio. And we were formed about 30 years ago. But the company just evolves incredibly fast. It's been remarkable. I've only been here for about a year and 10 months, and it has been a fun and wild ride. But Premier has architecture, interior design, project management, procurement, corporate engineering, and development, under our umbrella. And we're 150 people in our office here. We're based in Dallas, Texas. And it's just really interesting because, the departments are not siloed, right? We're very well integrated. We work very well collaboratively together. There's a lot of amazing talent here. And we're just growing our team so rapidly, and evolving, towards the direction of doing more ground up projects and more development projects. So we started initially just doing kind of renovation, PIP work, and now, and really truly at first just for Ashford. But now we were just going through the revenue, and we're doing 60% of our revenue is third party clients on the architectural side. And I think it's very close on the ID side as well. 40% is Ashford, and we're just, we're gaining a lot of momentum. And it's incredibly exciting, both on the renovation, adaptive reuse side, as well as ground up projects.
That's amazing. 60% is third party.
That's correct. Yeah.
No kidding. Because actually in vertically integrated, having between Braemar and Ashford over 100 hotels, 105 plus, that to me is where at some point I think an ownership group that has, I don't know, starting somewhere in the 50 to 70 to, I don't know, there's not many that have over 100, but that's at the point I think where the scale makes sense to become vertically integrated, because then you can staff the great team that you have and that Hector is, CEO of, and collaborating all together and not have to deal with the lumpiness of everything we do. Because like if you have 10 hotels, it gets very lumpy, and then you can't really support the team that you have the entire time. One of the things I found interesting about my conversation with Hector from a while ago, and if people haven't listened to that, I definitely suggest please do. He comes from oil and gas. Like he was building like freaking oil platforms and I don't even know, crazy industrial projects. And to go from that to hospitality seems like so incredibly different. But really, my takeaway from him was it's really about, as it always is, shocker, the people and collaborating and having a vision. So I'm curious how you said that you guys are very collaborative and not siloed. How do you physically, with so many different channels, collaborate on a day-to-day basis? Like, how do you break through those departments and make those dotted lines work?
Yeah, you know what? It's a great question, but somehow it just flows naturally here, right? We're all on one floor. Gail's office is next to mine. Hector's office is just 10 doors down here. The development team is adjacent to our office. So we really just are in the office and we're talking every day. At times we're running across the office to go to talk to one person or another. We're just very mingled, right? It's an open door policy. I think it's a very welcoming, environment to work in. And, we're very solutions driven. So if there is an issue, Hector, Franklin, everybody on the team, Johannes, they immediately just roll up their sleeves and they're like, how do we solve this? Right. Everyone's willing to pitch in and figure it out. So I think it's really a mindset, and a cultural value that is just exemplified here. And, that starts with Hector, right? So it's just a really cool place to be.
Hey, everybody. We've been doing this podcast for over 3 years now. And one of the themes that consistently comes up is sustainability. And I'm just really proud to announce that our sponsor, Berman Falk Hospitality Group, is the first within our hospitality industry to switch to sustainable and recyclable packaging, eliminating the use of styrofoam. Please check out their impact page in the show notes for more info. I'm glad you're really busy, because one of the things I would say for our industry in the hospitality design world, as far as renovating, repositioning, building new hotels, I'm saying that we've been in like a 5-year recession since COVID, since just after COVID, right? Once all that works, it's really slowed down. The number of projects is much, much, much less. Um, I also think that my metaphor is like there's this lake of CapEx and new builds that is up here and waiting to get done. And stuff is getting done from some PIP stuff here and there, et cetera, et cetera. But there's like a dam holding it back. And the dam could be interest rates. It could be the uncertainty of the election, the outcome of the election, tariff uncertainty to make things pencil out. At some point, that dam has to break. And sitting in your seat right now and looking at what you're looking at and doing 60% third party and all these cool other projects, what is your take on that metaphor, number one? And number two, what do you think still needs to happen for that dam to start releasing some more water so we get out of this recession?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I do think it's interest rates, right, are a key factor here. I think that's the biggest factor that we hear about. I mean, it does seem to be,
And labor costs, labor costs.
yes, labor costs. I mean, I don't know that we've seen the end of that, right? One of the things that I find interesting is we do have a lot of clients who are looking to potentially switch to more modular construction because they
Oh,
fear, labor shortages. And I do see that as likely going to occur on a few of our projects here that are multifamily or hospitality. We have one concept that we developed. The first one's going into Tennessee. And, we were studying how we would adapt, that concept for other sites and potentially utilizing modular.
mm.
So I do think that that is one trend that we're going to see emerge out of this difficulty with potential labor shortages. Um, but yes, I mean, I do think interest rates, we do have quite a bit of ground up going on, and there seems to be a lot of movement. And it's like very specific, groups of clients that are very aggressive right now. I mean, they're scouring the country looking for, sites, um, gearing up on prototypes, to um, place across the country.
Mhm.
And it really is interesting, the markets, because it is so diverse. I mean, there's a heavy concentration kind of in the Southeast, specifically Tennessee for us right now. Um, a lot of movement in Texas. Our development team is really focused on the Texas market, which I think is very exciting. We're very fortunate to be here. And then, we do also have a lot of development in California, Colorado, in terms of some of the third party work. So, there really hasn't been a specific market though that we can pinpoint besides Texas. It's so broad and it's multifamily and hospitality, and some other miscellaneous projects, hospitality suites and other things.
So I'm actually surprised. Like I have seen modular hospitality projects happen, whether it's the entire building or elements of it, like the bathrooms. And I see it comes in fits and starts, and then it's never really taken off. But to me, it just seems like because you have scale and repetition in hotels, it should. I hate it when I use the word should, but I would think it would take place more often than it actually does. What do you think is making it seem more viable now, in your opinion? And what do you think has held it back from more wide scale adaptation?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Yeah, I too have experienced that in my career where there's been fits of it, right? And we've gotten very excited about it at times and then backed off and really not utilized it, taken projects through DD and then backed out and done conventional construction. I do think it is that potential labor shortage. That is what I'm hearing, right? And just the cost of labor, and being able to produce these very quickly, with a lot of precision, right? If you go visit some of the factories, they're really exceptional. It's so interesting. It's very robotic. They really generate them quickly, very cost effectively. I think, some of the projects where we've had some issues with it is that we're doing a lot of, podium projects, right? And, I think that they thought it would be cost effective if it was truly, 5 stories of modular, not over a podium, right? Some of the difficulty too lies, and I have one client who's very intriguing because they've really done a lot of study about locations of various manufacturing plants and the radius around it, and done a lot of cost analysis regarding shipping to specific sites. And they even hone in on specific multifamily sites, think areas where there is a need or where land's already zoned for multifamily. And I do think that's such a smart approach. And I do think we are going to see more of it. We are studying it for a few projects now. Um, Full modular versus like what you said, either just a kitchen or a bathroom. And that has an adaptive reuse application, right? Where if you remove a segment of curtain wall or exterior, skin, and you can, move in one modular unit that is just a bathroom that's replicated on the project, or kitchen, and be able to place them and then construct the walls around it. I think there is also an application for that in adaptive reuse.
Yeah, I found that the challenge in that seems to be like with the older buildings, they tend to settle in interesting ways. And then as architects and designers want very little tolerance built into everything. They want it so perfect. You have to really like over 8 or 20 foot runs, like account for some major changes in elevation, which causes some big gaps to emerge in other places. And oftentimes I found that in 2 or 3 instances that those gaps become surprises when everything starts getting installed. And then that's a whole other gremlin. Um, on the Ren Tower, you said that the floor plate is 33,000 square feet versus the National was how much?
It was 18,600.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is another interesting thing because obviously we're all reading about the office and commercial depression that's going on at the extreme vacancy rates. And one of the challenges with converting the office buildings that are out there and not as occupied is the size of the footprint, because the interior spaces don't get light, or you have to put plumbing, or it just, they're real challenges. What are the, as you are approaching with your architect hat on the Wren Tower and doubling the size of that footprint, how are you addressing those light, plumbing, access, elevate, I don't even know all the things for the interior spaces?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, a lot of large scale office towers just present some huge challenges, right? One of the things that's interesting, though, is we typically find that they're over elevated, right? I mean, the National had, I think, 26 elevators, right? Various banks, and there are tranche of banks. And, Renaissance Tower is the same, but that also creates an opportunity. I think there's 24 passenger elevators at Renaissance Tower. And then in addition, we have freight elevators and jump elevators. And the opportunity that that provides, though, is the ability to allocate specific uses to specific elevator banks, and that enables you to secure it at the ground floor, create designated lobbies, prevents kind of cross, circulation between uses. If I'm buying, a luxury condo, I really don't want to cross the public domain, right? When I go from my parking garage, to the public condo lot, the condo lobby, right? So there is a lot of opportunities with these large scale buildings that you typically would not have in small scale buildings. So,
From a, I don't even know what it'd be, like a community board or local legislation perspective, are those I don't even know, are those like organizations, whether it's a community board, a planning and zoning committee, or some other entity within the city or town, are you finding anecdotally that they're really open to converting office spaces into hotels or residential?
yeah, I think so, especially post, COVID, right? There's so many buildings that are underutilized and, they just sit empty. So it's not creating a tax basis, for the city. It's just incredibly underutilized. So I think typically in Dallas, I think has been very good in my experience, with the AHJ. And some of the codes, in Dallas are a little bit more flexible, even for conversions than other locations. That being said, with the International Building Code, when you change a use, you do trigger life safety compliance and compliance with several other aspects of the code. So there are a lot of challenges as soon as you change the use from office to, which is a B occupancy, to an assembly, which, of course you have assembly loads, in your hotel as with event spaces or food and beverage spaces. And then you have, R1 and R2, which is hotel and multifamily residential. So you are changing the occupancy whenever you move and convert, from an office building into a hotel or multifamily residential. And I think the most challenges that we face typically are when we go to put, event spaces, ballrooms, right? Large scale event spaces, within the body of the tower. And, you have all sorts of challenges, with high rises, but specifically with the National and with Renaissance Tower, they are super high rise because they're over 420 feet above grade, right?
Mm.
The highest level of occupancy exceeds 420 feet. And so that creates another set of challenges, on top of it just being high rise. So just with assembly loads, egress, right? You typically only have, two or three stairs to egress an office building, and you're increasing the occupancy. So you do have to add additional egress and structural reinforcing because you're going from, a live load of, 50 square feet with an office to 100 square feet with an assembly load. So there are several challenges to contend with. And
Mm.
that goes back to the additional costs that, I think, you carry with an adaptive reuse project and why the projects are difficult to pencil.
And aside from the engineering challenges of doing that, um, in converting an office and increasing those loads, like you just mentioned, are the local jurisdictions open to having there be larger assemblies and larger, I don't know, ballrooms, et cetera, or do they think it will increase traffic, and like what kind of pushback, if they're not into these conversions, what kind of pushback would you typically get from a concerned community board or a planning and zoning?
I think, traffic is an interesting one. That is true. Depends on the jurisdiction. Downtown Dallas recently passed a a rule that I think no additional parking is necessary in downtown within specific districts. I believe. I think it has to do with density requirement. But they've always been very forgiving about parking quantities downtown for buildings that were older than I believe initially there was a rule like they were built before 1987, and then also for specific uses. But you do regardless, when you're adding parking spaces, you're adding traffic. And so traffic studies are typically, required. And, it depends on, the location. But you can potentially have to study traffic for a wide radius. It could be up to, a half a mile. I've seen a half a mile. I think I saw a mile in one instance. So that is certainly a concern of the city. But life safety in general, right? I mean, life safety is, our number one responsibility as architects. And, it does, we do have to ensure public safety, right? So it's really important that we study the building and we look at the placement of all the assembly loads and how we can contend with it. But there are options, right? We've added additional stairs and projects. We've looked at using occupancy evac elevators, areas of refuge or horizontal, assemblies, to be able to assist in egressing that occupancy load. So where there's a will, there's a way, right?
Okay, so in your career, aside from asbestos, in an adaptive reuse, what was the biggest OMG, how are we going to deal with this surprise you've ever had? And how did you did you have to like raise additional capital, or did that tax incentive give you a good margin of safety? Like, how did you navigate that?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, there are so many, but the largest one was when I was working on the National, the exterior facade. It was a white pentelic marble from the battlefields of Marathon and Greece. And
No
it was
way.
it was so cool. It was so incredible, right? And you really want to preserve that. You're like, we can't replace that in kind. There's no replacing marble from the battlefields of Marathon and Greece. And it was the laminating for the building, and we were looking for a solution. And no engineer would really like sign off on a blind concealed pin. And because it was a historic tax credit project, we were trying to preserve that marble. And we weren't allowed because of the historic tax credits to show like a pinning mechanism on the exterior of it, right? And we were really trying to find a solution for this. And what we came up with is we worked with a company, I think it was Honeycomb, and we first of all, we laser scanned the entirety of the podium of the building. It took every measurement of every marble panel and then removed all the marble panels, sent them to China and sent them to Florida.
Did anyone drop a panel while they were doing it?
There were several shattered panels. Just because they were so deteriorated.
Do you know what that reminds me of? They're coming out with a new History of the World Mel Brooks movie. But in the first one, Moses came down with the 15. He had 3 tablets. I have the 15, and he dropped one. Oops, 10 commandments.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my God.
The developer did right by this because it was a very costly, expense, but it was the right thing to do and they saw it through. But each panel was veneered and then reapplied with epoxy to a honeycomb panel and mechanically rehung on the building in the same dimension.
Oh, to the backside of it.
Exactly.
Oh,
And
wow.
so if you look at before photos and after photos of that project, it's such a remarkable improvement. But, we pursued historic tax credits for that project. So state and national had to approve that. And they actually were so pleased with the solution that I spoke at a couple of conferences about that solution with Texas Historic Commission. So, I think like we said, where there's a will, there's a way. I mean,
Wow.
granted, that was a costly expenditure, but it was the right thing to do. And it really restored just the beauty of that building.
And did you have to recast after that? Did you have to recast the performa or raise additional capital, or were you still within the margin of safety?
Oh, I can't recall.
Okay. Oh my God.
There was an ample contingency, on that project. But as you can imagine, I mean, there's so many things that come, that surface that you have to contend with, that you were never planning on. So that was one of many things.
Or you could just be like the British and go back to Greece and like just steal all the or the all the marble from the Battle of Marathon and put it in your new museum downtown there. You're like the Elgin marbles. Um, wow. Okay. And then actually on the contingency side, is there a rule of thumb of contingency percentage of overall budget on a new ground up development building versus um, an adaptive reuse or historic preservation?
Yeah, that's an excellent question too. I mean, we typically see kind of 5%, right? Although with adaptive reuse, I think we always recommend 10 to 12%, but I think it's rarely been carried, just depending on the size of that project, right? Um, with our team, like, with Premier, we've done several historic projects. And, I know there have been some very big, difficult surprises to contend with. And, I would love to go get those figures and send them over to you, like what contingencies like we've carried on those projects. Because we have done, some incredible, difficult projects. Le Pop, New Orleans, Le Méridien in downtown Fort Worth, I know was a difficult one. I know there was some structural, repair that needed to be done there. That was a significant cost. That too went through a massive abatement project. And then autograph collection in Key West is really a truly stunning Spanish colonial revival building. That one I know had significant repair and, have been battered by many hurricanes over the years.
Yeah. Oh, I can't imagine. Oh, yeah. Are there any additional questions you wished I would have asked you?
I think I would love to just briefly talk about, I was trying to think through, some of our projects, and really what makes them special, right? And capitalizing on that architecture. One of the things is that some of our projects were really designed by some spectacular architects like Philip Johnson. And I think what's so fantastic about Premier's body of work on the adaptive reuse side is, the ability to really like have rigorous preservation, but yet adapt it. And it's like this adaptive layering, right? Like just transforming and converting underutilized areas and really celebrating the architecture for what it brings to the table. And I think, we did that very well. Um, in the Notary, for instance, the Notary is a classic revival building. It's located in Philadelphia's historic center, and it was initially designed by Philip Johnson. So you can imagine, right? You have this iconic architect with an iconic building, and you really want to make sure it's preserved. And I think, what I love about adaptive reuse too is just the compatibility with the soft brands, right? The flexibility to really create that story and celebrate aspects of the architecture, and just integrate it into the adaptation seamlessly. So that building really respected all the architectural framework, and then just utilized it. So you're really working with the building, and you're not you're just looking for solutions, right? You're studying each space and determining what uses, in what brand criteria in terms of programmatic elements would be situated best in each of those locations without having to manipulate the architecture. And I think we did that extremely well there. And then, another autograph is La Concha in Key West. And we just completed that project. And it's really one of my favorite projects. It's a Spanish colonial, it's right on Duval Street. So, very energetic street, very public facing. And, previously, it was very closed off to the street. And, I think we saw the opportunity to really like celebrate the Latin roots, of Key West, and also like really adapt the public facing areas, and really open it up. And so there's a new bar that was created there, and it really captures, this feel of like Hemingway, right? It's just very kind of whimsical and playful, and it's just got this really great like Cuban heritage that's saturated, in the lobby. And then a new little cafe that is capitalizes on like Cuban like dominoes. And so this theme is kind of carried out, but what's fun about it is each space is so drastically unique in terms of the interior design, but it all tells the same consistent story.
Mm. Did you import six-toed cats?
Yet there's a few on the property.
Oh,
We
good.
just imported them from next door.
Yeah, that's just the weirdest thing, like six-toed cat. I didn't know that was a thing. So cool. Um, well, Aimee, I mean, this has been just a fantastic conversation to talk about just a vertically integrated company, vertically integrated projects, and dig in a little bit more so I could learn. Selfishly, I want to learn more about adaptive reuse. So I thank you for helping me out with that. If people wanted to learn more about you or Premiere, what's a good way for them to get involved or learn more?
Yeah, they can go to www.premierpm.com or find me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to take just a couple of seconds to just say thank you, thank you, thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Very much, Dan. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to all of our listeners. Without you, I wouldn't be learning about adaptive reuse and talking to amazing architects like Aimee, and vertical integration. Something I think we could use more of. So thank you. And if this changed your idea on hospitality or how to deliver it or change it or adaptively reuse it, please pass this along to someone who you think could benefit or learn more. We're all about impact. So